I'm going to present today thing about Scrum and thinking patterns which were not discovered by me, but I kind of mapped those thinking patterns to Scrum practices, and I'm going to tell you about it today. What the? No. No. Why? Okay. Probably I'm going to click like this. Okay, who am I? My name is Dmitry Lebedev. I'm from Riga. There I'm working around 20 years as a developer, as a development manager, tester, Scrum master, agile coach for some organizations, and so on. Also, I co-founded a couple of communities. Agile Latvia is my favorite child, another one, and right now I'm helping other communities to grow. I'd like to mention it separately. It's Riga Tech Girls. They are trying to engage more girls and women into IT development. So if anyone is interested, you can contact them. So what is Scrum? What is it? It's kind of a framework which everyone uses these days. It's simple. It's depicted in HBO show Silicon Valley. By the way, how many of you have seen this show? Am I on the wrong conference? What? So, no, just maybe you have enough fun in your daily life, so you don't have to watch it over again over TV. So yeah, Scrum is quite popular, and why it's popular? I guess because it's simple. It has very few rules, has very little of artifacts and roles. It's transparent, so you can apply it easily in your organization. That's what people who sell Scrum are telling you, right? What could possibly go wrong with this simple solution? From my experience, simple rules are quite easily to break or bend at your will or misinterpret. For instance, I asked my 3-year daughter to put on her panties and socks, and I'm not going to turn on cartoons until you do it. So this is how it was looking. He did what I asked her, yeah, but in her kind of own way. So, and unfortunately, the same things are happening with Scrum. I guess there are as many versions of Scrum as many Scrum trainers, or maybe even as many Scrum masters, and so on and so on. By the way, I'm sorry. I'd like to tell you, I understand that you are after the lunch, you are digesting, but if I'll catch someone sleeping, I'll kick him or her, gently but firmly. So, yeah, rules are simple, but we can bend them as we want. So, I'm going to tell you a couple of sentences, and if you agree with it, please raise your hand. So, first, Scrum does not give hint on how to solve problems. Okay, kind of half. Okay, next. Scrum is just another industry hype. So, everyone is okay with Scrum. Oh, except me and a couple of wise guys. Okay, Scrum Master training is just 2 or 3 days of brainwashing. Literally, you've been taught that you can solve anything with Scrum. You just do these sprints, plannings, retrospectives, and everything going to be fine, right? I got another example of kind of these easy things you can do whenever you want. Yeah, Olympic weightlifting. You know, nothing is complex about it. All you need is bar and weights, weight plates, and you can lift or snatch or jerk, whatever. You know, if you attend the weightlifting masterclass, it's kind of 3 simple movements. You just have to master them. You can do it even at home, taking the broomstick and doing all these exercises by yourself. And surprise is that by the end you won't be like this guy. Maybe not even after 3 months or 1 year. You and me, of course, will be more like this beautiful lady, lifting this empty bar for half a year. And if we could apply this analogy to your Scrum Master practice, after having this Scrum Master class, you also won't be able to lift the heavy weights. Nobody will give you the critical project with the large budget, or maybe someone will give you, but that means that you are in danger, because either he or she does not understand the conditions, or he or she wants you to fail. So also about this Scrum selling stories, there is a typical pattern how those stories are presented in books, in conferences, and so on. Like when someone is describing the situation before the Scrum, it describes the nastiness, chaos, and so on, bizarre. And then, I don't know. Yeah. Then Scrum Master came, and by starting doing retrospectives, sprint planning, having user stories, everything became nice and polite, and everyone was happy. It also reminds me one practical exercise from drawing. When you need to draw a horse, you starting with a simple structure, you see, nothing is complex about it. And then just by adding few simple stuff, you're getting this, voila. Yeah, that's how I see many Scrum success stories are presented. And the question is, if everything is so simple, why Scrum teams are still failing? By the way, who do you think was driving this car? On the previous conference, the suspect number 1 was this guy. Just because he looks guilty. And top management is wondering what went wrong, how this guy, after 2 days of Scrum master class, could crash the car. Oops, not. And another example, you know, 2 years ago I bought this phone, and recently I found that if at the beginning it was enough charge it every like 40 hours, right now it's enough to charge it like every 18 hours. And I thought maybe I should buy a new one, but let's try first to replace the battery. I replaced the battery, nothing changed. So, and I realized that all those software upgrades in 2 years, they started to consume my battery much faster. So, and I guess the same situation is with classical Scrum, because classical Scrum is 20 years old. And if we ask ourselves, why can't we use Scrum if it's only 20 years old? My question is, are we still using this device? It was a top-notch device at 1996. So, or maybe we should drive still those cars. Or why don't we use this? It's only 20 years old, but somehow it doesn't fulfill what we are expecting from the software. So maybe Scrum also does not do everything we want it to do. Yeah, and also speaking about the differences between application 2 years ago, mobile application 2 years ago, and now, we can also would like to review the organizational context shift in these 20 years. So I started to work in 1997, so it's almost 1 year after Scrum was kind of invented. So it was usually one team per product. Geographical distribution were really rare. Product delivery cadence was years. So if you're paying for something, then you could expect that in 2 years you will get it. And communication was through emails and phone calls. My first boss was calling to somewhere in the middle of nowhere, to Russia, in the middle of Siberia, and screaming in a phone tube. And someone from there was screaming him back, and that's how we made the software those days, how we got our requirements. And the project plans were massive documents. I've seen it in a different company. But anyway, and what do we have now? Now we got multiple teams per one product because products became much bigger. Geographically distributed, you know it by yourself mostly here. As I understood, many people are working together with Scandinavian companies, American, UK companies, and so on. And it's not hard to reach some person on the other side of the globe, even through Google Hangouts, Skype call, or teleconferencing, and so on. Communication is instant. So, and product delivery happens within a weeks, even within a days. Even in my company, there were weeks when we got released into production every day of different components and so on. And project plans are interactive. Right now we are using Wiki because everything changes so fast that it's hard to maintain the plan in Word document. We have to be able to change it instantly and publish it and get the feedback and so on. So, yeah, I tried to depict this organizational shift so you can see it. Are you agree with me or not? Yes, okay, at least someone. So, but the question is, why are we still choosing this old stuff over new fancy stuff, like, I don't know what? Why don't we have too much of alternatives to Scrum? Like, many people are using Kanban, but anyway, okay. So, and what, to your opinion, what is the most important part of the Scrum? Anyone? Not really. Okay, let's have an analogy to some cars, machine. What is the part which is doing the most of the job? Yeah, but for Scrum, it's people. Yeah? And what is the problem with people? Well, they might change, yeah, but different people, if you gather different people within one room, and if you throw them some question, will they agree instantly? Probably not. Probably they will start the discussions and fights, and the one who's stronger and bigger will kill everyone else, and then you'll get kind of state of agreement within a team. Not kill, but maybe suppress everyone. So, and if we are thinking about ourselves as about kind of civilized humans, yeah, this way doesn't work for us, right? We have to kind of find a way to work together, to think how to solve the problem. So, and this is the place where we are coming to systematic patterns of thought. So people do not solve the problems each time in a different way. They have their own ways of solving problems, and this is really what might be called systematic patterns of thought. And I came to the idea of making talk about this after I read this quote that the problem with corrupted government is not that people who were elected into the government are corrupted. It's a way of thinking. If you choose some random people out of the crowd and put them into the government, next government also will be corrupted as the previous one. So it's our mind and thinking, ways of thinking, making the situation either good or bad. So, and there is a book called Mental Traps by Canadian philosopher Andrei Kukla, and he's listing 11 mental traps with funny names like persistence, amplification, fixation, reversion, and so on and so on. And I'm going to tell you about them a little bit, and also I will give the examples of how they intersect with this stuff. Scrum in its nutshell. Are you familiar with that picture? Raise the hands who's familiar. Not so many. Okay. But we can distill this picture to the simple one and the one which you already seen today. Yes, it's we are doing the planning, then we are doing something, then we are checking, and then we are adjusting according to the problems we found and so on. So, and in this kind of framework, first mental trap to review will be persistence. As you know, on the Easter Island, these big stone heads were built for centuries or even millennium, but the ultimate purpose of it were lost during this amount of time, but people still kept building those stone heads and putting them, and they just extinguished all these forests on the island, and ended up with no wood, and it was a quite poor place to live until the tourists started to come there. So what is persistence? The persistence is when you keep doing something regardless of the result. So in this circular picture, I tried to streamline it. You plan something to build the head. You're doing it, you checking or not checking the result, but it does not affect, it doesn't push you to adjust your behavior and so on. Also, this thing is quite popular within programmers. Like, I heard a lot of them saying, oh yeah, we did this application, we built this application that way, so let's keep doing it this way. And regardless of the fact that they built it wrong, and it was like 10 years ago, so right now we kind of need to adjust, but they're refusing. So They are persistent in their programming techniques or framework choice and so on, but it's a kind of mental trap. Next one is amplification. When you're using unproportionally large efforts to solve the problem. The classic example of it was given by Gojko Adzik. He told the story when the company he was working for decided that they need to implement IP geolocation feature into their product, and they started to brainstorm it. They created the kind of work breakdown structure. They estimated in half a year, and afterwards, after these 5 whys questions, developers discovered that all they need is to show to users some relevant to their location information. And users are authorized in the system through their Facebook account, where they specifying where do they live. So they took this information from the Facebook account of the user. It took them 2 days to implement and test, and that's how they reduced the amount of work from half a year to 2 days. Next one is fixation. When you probably, how many of programmers are here? Okay. So probably someone find, at least for me, it was a couple of times when I'm fixing myself on writing, on finishing this code, and even I feel that I want to go to the toilet, but I feel rushed, and so I have to finish it. Probably this situation happens on a larger scale when a team is fixated to finish something regardless of the other needs of the customers, of the product department, and so on. And probably when they are coming to the team response is like, we are in the middle of the sprint, we committed to that goal, so go away and come back in 2 weeks, or maybe 3 weeks, and so on. So I guess it's also kind of hurting your Scrum. So it's better, if something goes wrong, it's better to cancel your sprint and revisit your plans. So, reversion. It's a situation when you're riding a dead horse. You might not notice that the horse is dead, so you keep pushing it forward, and some most persistent people are succeeding with that, like a couple of centimeters forward, but it's still a movement. And they are trying to use different programming technique, management technique, but if the horse is dead, the best approach to step off it. What it means in terms of our Scrum. Somehow the product or the feature is a failure, but people are trying to push it forward anyway. I got my own experience when our product owner asked us to build a feature which would allow users to download all the case photos within one file. So, and we were understanding that it's not necessary, nobody will use that. But product owner was quite consistent about this, and he was pushing us forward. Despite everyone else except him, even the users were not so sure about this feature. So we built this feature, 3 people, 2 weeks. And after half a year, I checked how many times this feature was used. It was like 10 times, and 7 of them were used during the testing. So actually, 2-person week for 1 usage. anticipation. When someone in your team cannot hold himself back and rushing into writing the code. Person probably not quite interested about planning, about good user stories. He or she understands everything perfectly, so let's skip this useless sprint planning. I know what I need to write, and he's rushing into this. And in my team, this person is usually me. So when I became a Scrum Master, I have to push myself a little bit back. So right now I'm not so anticipating to write the code, but anyway. The problem is that even if everything is crystal clear to you, it might not be so clear to your product owner, to your customers, so you have to ask them. Even if it's kind of formality, but you have to ask them, do you want me to build this and that? And only if they reply, yes, yes, exactly, then you can rush into the coding. Otherwise, you will do something, present it, and they will be like, we didn't ask for this and for that, and probably you will have to start from the beginning. So it's better to wait a little bit than redo all the work. Resistance. It's usually happens in the organizations where Scrum is pushed from the top, and people are scared of those changes they're holding for their places, so they do not push back, but they're trying to resist all those changes. They're saying, no, we did just fine without your Scrum, with just... So, and when you find yourself that you are kind of against some changes, you have to ask yourself why. Because it might be just fear of the unknown, and it prevents you from trying this new thing. So you don't accept, instead of doing things and moving forward and adjusting, you finding the new arguments why this stuff will not work. And we got a lot of discussions about that, and I found that it's quite common that people rather would spend half a day discussing why this thing will not work than spend 1 hour to try how it's working or not. So next, procrastination. That's my favorite mental trap. It's usually happening when I have a lot of plans, and all of them are great, but I don't know which one I need to start with. And also, it's hard to pick one right action because everything is so big. And sometimes teams are also spending a lot of time on planning, so we have to understand everything right, so we don't have to rush into the coding and so on and so on. But at a certain point, they become kind of procrastinating. They spend much more time avoiding to start than rather discussing what they need to in order to start. Division. Also my favorite one, because the company asked me to be a Scrum Master, but also they want to see me writing the code. So, and I found myself that it's hardly work for me, at least, because when I'm doing my Scrum Master job, I'm spending much more time with other people and helping them to write the code. And when I'm going back to my computer, I'm really exhausted and I don't want to write any code. Or when I'm starting the day with writing the code, I'm trying to push away everyone who's asking me for help or for advice or for peer review and so on. And they're doing on their own, and after that, okay. as a Scrum Master, I'm failing. So here it looks like team is trying to divide their time on too many stuff, on too many activities. In the acceleration, yeah, it's when someone who knows everything about what you kind of need to do, rushing forward to finish this task or feature or user story, ignoring his other colleagues, and usually those shortcuts end quite bad for the team, because this rushing forward guy ignoring acceptance criteria, definition of done, and so on, just to finish the task and pick the next one. In regulation, it's a kind of completely mental thing. Yeah, when you're discussing Scrum practices, someone usually picking up when you have sprint planning, for instance, but someone is asking the question, when do we start doing estimations? Well, we did it once, we did it twice, we did it 3 times in a row, but then we discovered that our estimation sucks and we can deliver only 30% of what we have planned for the sprint. So that's how we discovered that our estimates are pretty bad. And we stopped wasting time on them, but still someone was asking, oh, how can we live without estimation? Scrum requires estimation. So you have those rules only in your mind. Scrum is quite flexible, and if you think that until you improve something in your Scrum process, you need to abandon this estimation, since it's a waste of time right now, you can do it. Another side of the same problem is formulation. When you got the formula in your mind and you're trying to apply this formula everywhere. As a Scrum Master, I don't have to intervene with team's decision. As a Scrum Master, I don't have to write the code and so on. But sometimes you have to intervene, sometimes you have to write the code and so on. So, how to avoid those mental traps? Probably the best advice is to follow this pattern of thinking. So you're planning something, you're doing something, then you're reviewing what you have done, and then you're adjusting your behavior or your actions. So, and you should have focused yourself on a goal. And entire team should have focus, the same focus. Our usual question in our team was like, within a day, what can we do in order to move ourselves closer to this goal? And usually we were throwing away all tasks which were just a waste of time, which didn't help us to reach the goal. Also, it might be good to learn a few new things as a large-scale Scrum, because some problems are not coming from inside of the team, some problems are coming from the organization itself. Also, when you have some problems within your team, it's good to know about 5 dysfunctions of the team described by Patrick Lencioni. I'm not going to tell you about this, so you can check yourself. System thinking, it's a way of understanding complex problems or complex solutions. And nonviolent communication is just a way to speak to people and understand what they're trying to tell you and so on. Also, it's good to revisit some classics like Peopleware, Mystical Man Months, and Death March. So, who read any of the books? Of course you did. Of course you did. Yeah, and maybe if you want to have some starting point, I highly recommend you to check the book of Zuzi Shokhova from Czech Republic. She just combined most of the things I was talking about into the Kindle book Great Scrum Master. So they're just nice aggregation of all the techniques, of all the approaches to the Scrum team, to solving Scrum problems, and so on. So, also feel free to connect with me, and I guess that's all from me today.
So thank you, Dmitry, for great, I would say, philosophical, critical, and funny presentation. And we have 10 minutes for questions and answers, I hope. Do we have any? I believe that we do. Please raise your hand. No questions.
Previous time I was giving this talk, the one guy asked, so, do you think the Scrum is completely useless? So, does anyone think that Scrum is completely useless after this talk? No?
Can you raise your hands if you think that Scrum is completely useless? No? Can I ask this? I have one question. So, you were giving examples with the Windows, you know, with automobiles, cars, and let's say we had Windows 95 20 years ago. You know. Do we have a Scrum version 5 or version 2010? Is it evolving? Do you see any changing?
Not really, not really, because I think that Scrum is flexible enough to adapt to modern world. You just don't have to follow the book blindly. You have to adapt it to your needs, and also there are a lot of practices around the Scrum, like this SAFe framework, which Daryl was talking about, LESS framework promoted, a lot of visualizing tools which are helping to monitor the progress of the Scrum team, and so on.
Thanks. And now, what about any questions? I promise I'll give a present. No, I don't have one. Really? Come on, please. Should I ask another one?
Okay.
So, you were giving very different concepts, philosophical concepts of how you say mental traps. Yeah? And you say that you are the background of those mental traps. You had a list of 10 or so, I believe.
11.
11, yeah. You were using philosophical work.
Yeah, but it's, yes.
And, can I ask, did you find any other from your own experience? Can you adapt something? Maybe there is more to it.
Probably it's just a classification of some problems. We can invent any other classification we would be pleased to invent. For me, it's I got another idea to list kind of Scrum Master fallacies. I mean, false beliefs, like Scrum Master believes that his organization understands what Scrum is for. For instance, but it's rather kind of organizational trap for the Scrum Master. So I think that depends on the angle you're looking into the problems with the Scrum team. Your classification of these problems might change quite drastically. So do not stick to those 11 mental traps. You can find your own classification of the problems and so on.
Thanks. Okay. Maybe you now have a question. Oh, thank you.
Finally.
Yeah. No present, thank you. So you said that you are working as a Scrum Master in your company and also as a developer. Do you think that you should stick to only like being a full-time Scrum Master, or being a part of the, as a team member is still something that you can do and like divide these?
Actually, I'm not a Scrum Master anymore, already 2 weeks. Company decided to merge two teams together, and there will be only one Scrum Master, so I dedicated to coding activity 100% of my time. But I understand your question. And I got the example for you. We got also one person who was combining several roles. And first her role was product owner, second role was tester, and the third role was second line of customer support. And when, as a second line of person from second line of customer support, she was receiving the problem with from the customers, as a product owner, she was instantly raising the priority of this one above the all, and the team was disrupted doing what the product owner told them, and so on. For me, situation was kind of similar, because any activity you're dedicating yourself to is like a gas. It can take the whole of volume. This activity can take all of your time. So I think that if we trying to divide those activities, it will be unproductive, because I've seen like 10 years ago there was a kind of a paper, scientific one, which was telling that if you have two concurrent activities and you're switching between them all the time, you're spending on each of them only 40% of your time. And if you got three activities running in parallel, you're spending on each of them only 20% of your time. And if you got four, you do not kind of complete any of them in reasonable time. So I think that Scrum Master role is a dedicated role for dedicated person. So the guy or girl should not do anything else except this. And for me, it was hard because I like coding and I also like being Scrum Master. So I was always pulling myself into two different directions. So I'm always was feeling that if not this coding, I could do this and that as a Scrum Master. And when I started to do this and that, I felt that if not this and that, I could write a nice feature and so on. So it's kind of hard for, maybe not for anyone, but at least for me. Okay? Out of the questions. Thanks for not sleeping, actually. And thanks for the present.